Hi there, I'm Robbie Jeanette, author of The Key of One, and I want to ask you a really important question. It's kind of profound in its implications, and it's simple. When a song transposes, what transposes? What do I mean by that? Well, if I take a chord progression, and I want to move that to any of the other 11 keys, I'm taking the structure of music and I'm moving it from key to key intact. This is undeniable proof that the structure of music is what is moving from key to key. It is not dependent on any individual key. Therefore, it's not dependent on the keys by letter. What it is dependent on is the structure of music that is primary, and that is the numerical structure of music. I want you to think about this. Do not discount this. When you transpose a song, you are moving the numerical structure intact from key to key. This is not just the proof that the numerical structure is the primary structure of music, but it also shows that we have been teaching music wrong as a language and as a pursuit, because we leave this off the table. Now, I've been studying music for my whole life. I've been a teacher. I've taught at Musicians Institute. I've taught at elementary schools. I've taught people of all different levels, from professionals to beginners. I've taught pre-K all the way up to people in their 80s. And I guarantee you, I have studied this on every different level. Now, classical musicians always seem to get bent out of shape when I talk about studying music without notation involved, because notation is such a huge part of classical. And let me speak directly to classical musicians who, if you're bristling at this, don't. Here's the deal with classical. Classical doesn't transpose. That's why you have the key name in the piece. Piano concerto in C major. You don't hear Don't Stop Believing in F major. You don't hear that with songs made of chords, because songs made of chords are meant to transpose. Classical pieces are not. Who is going to transpose a 60-minute symphony for a 90-piece orchestra into a different key? Most of those were written in a certain key for a certain reason, but songs made of chords are meant to transpose, and they show this proof so easily. So what does that leave us to do? It leaves us to change the conversation. The conversation has to be about the primary structure of music to understand it as a language. Then, and only then, can you really understand what notation is notating. And let's look at notation for a second. Notation is not a language of music. Notation is a phonetic language. You read the dots, you move your fingers, the music comes out. It does not require any understanding of what is happening, of what music means, of the push and pull of tension and resolve. All it requires is you to be very good at translating the phonetic language of notation to music on your instrument. Understanding music without notation is not a disservice to notation. In fact, it makes the notation more meaningful because you understand what it is that you're notating. I've seen and taught great classical musicians who can sit and put a piece of sheet music up there and play it beautifully, and when they take that music away, they're sitting in front of a piece of furniture. What they've recognized is that they have not developed any sort of voice of their own. They're very good at reproducing other people's music and voices, but they have no voice of their own. And that is a really disconcerting feeling when you have the chops and ability to read notation and perform, and yet you don't have any innate skills in using music as a language. So my whole goal of The Key of One and what I teach now, that I've developed since writing The Key of One, is to teach music numerically as its primary structure, and to give people an understanding and a voice. Now, the benefit of this will affect you no matter what kind of music you're in. But the biggest problem that I have with students is what they think music is in their minds versus what music actually is. So let's look at it in a really easy way. I like to use baking and cooking as an analogy. So let's say somebody writing a symphony is like a master chef. And let's say you at home writing a simple song are like a cook at home. And the chef may make the most amazing souffle while you're scrambling a simple egg. But an egg is an egg. 1 is 1, 2 is 2. So in a symphony, you're going to use a lot more of these numbered notes. But that doesn't make 2 any different than 2 in any recipe that you use it in. An egg is an egg. So I wanted to do this video to have some understanding in the public realm about why we teach music traditionally and why that doesn't serve us teaching music as an actual language. We do things in teaching music like running scales, highly useful in classical, but literally, to me, one of the most detrimental things in music outside of classical, because there are really not many, if any, melodies that follow a scale. So if you're going to be playing melodies, you're constantly going to be breaking up the scale. Better to have your fingers flexible and yet very, very knowledgeable of the shape of the scale and the numbers of the scale. And being able to move around that scale with dexterity doesn't mean you have to run the scales in order. The better exercise is to increase your finger dexterity based on flexibility and which fingers you want to play what notes based on scale shapes if you want, without actually running scales. So a lot of the exercise that I give for finger patterns to learn how to be dexterous and run scales if you'd like, also don't involve breaking you out of scale patterns that you've hammered in and learned because you thought you were supposed to. There's a lot of things that people do because they think they are supposed to. You think that you're supposed to read sheet music. And yet, some of the greatest songwriters of all time, Paul McCartney and John Lennon, George Harrison, Elton John, Bob Marley, don't read sheet music and don't need it to write. Having an innate sense of what chords do and having a great ear for melody and a mind for melody and lyric writing has nothing to do with reading notation. Now, if you're somebody that gets really angry when people discuss making and creating and performing music without notation, take a step back, because I want you to really look at all of the musicians that have created and written music without notation. You cannot tell me that they are somehow lesser. And I've had people try to say that, oh, the Beatles would have been greater had they only read sheet music. No, that's not something that you can make as a judgment just because you have a reliance on sheet music. So again, nothing against sheet music. Very valuable tool in classical, undeniable for what you need it for. Outside of classical, it tends to hinder and get in the way and cause more problems, mostly because people don't have an idea of what's being notated and don't realize it's a separate pursuit than understanding music. Understanding music is a very easy thing to do. And again, what people think in their minds that music is, this wizardry, leads them so far astray. If I'm teaching you very simple numbers that you learned when you were 2, very simple letters from the alphabet that you learned when you were 2, remind yourself, when you learned numbers, you didn't question the order of them. You learned them and you move on. When you learned the alphabet, you didn't question the order of the letters. You learned them and moved on. And yet in music, when we're applying numbers and letters, our mind constantly tries to ask us all sorts of questions that we have to remind ourselves, this is unchanging stuff. So much is finite. So much is concrete and steel and not moving in terms of this information. So you were able to lock down counting to 7. You were able to lock down the alphabet to G. That's all you need for this. So this is not about an advanced theory. This is not about advanced thinking. This is about basic ingredients. Again, going back to my analogy of cooking, if you have a chef, great baker, make a 9-foot tall wedding cake, 9-tiered with all frosting and ribbons and bells and whistles, it took a team weeks just to design it, let alone create it. And right next to it is a little tiny cupcake that you get at the gas station, a little yellow, machine printed cupcake. If you look at the wedding cake as a symphony and the cupcake as maybe Baby Shark or a simple song, yes, the artistry for the wedding cake is way above the cupcake. But look at the ingredients on the back: butter, flour, eggs, sugar, milk. It's a finite set of ingredients that we all have to work with. And I want to give you the tools to get moving, understanding, and using music as a language. So, hit me up for more conversation. I have tons of videos online, and let's keep the conversation rolling. Look for the numbers, listen for the numbers, and you shall find the primary language of music. Have a great one.